Welcome to the Sermon in the Valley with Pastor Rob Eller. You can find us on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, and iHeartRadio. If you like what you hear, please subscribe to the podcast on any of those platforms and share it with your friends and family. Thank you. Welcome back to the Sermon in the Valley. Pastor Rob Eller here with your Thursday commentary episode, I guess you could say. That's what these Thursday episodes have become. Commentary, historical lessons, things that have just been on my mind. I come to you today because there is a Washington Post article that is out. It came out relatively recently. Just actually a few months ago, but it's kind of circulating around again. And it's all about the quote-unquote clergy shortage that is hitting a lot of mainline churches in the United States. I, being a mainline pastor, was intrigued by it, and there's a lot of good information in there, and it's a lot of good stuff about how the mainline churches, especially the mainline Protestant churches, are dealing with congregations that are shrinking in size, and the fact that there are less and less graduates coming out of seminaries to take on these calls in these churches. And there's this belief that there is a clergy shortage. And in fact, there is a clergy shortage. More and more pastors are retiring. We're coming to the point where the baby boomer generation of pastors are retiring in such high numbers that there aren't enough new pastors coming out of the seminaries to make up the difference. In fact, I believe there aren't even enough graduates to cover even like maybe one state within the ELCA, I believe it was. There's more openings in one state in particular. I can't remember which state it was, but there's more openings in one state than there are graduates coming out of the ELCA seminaries. And that's pretty eye-opening. One would think, oh wow, that means that these new pastors can have their pick of where they want to go. But that's not the only thing with this. Yes, you can have your pick of where to go, but at the same time, as in this article, the Reverend Dr. Guy Irwin, formerly a bishop out in California, who's now the president of the United Lutheran Seminary in Gettysburg and Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, he had said, the problem is not we have a shortage of pastors, we have a shortage of congregations that can pay a full-time pastor the way they used to. And that is so true. Yes, there's a lot of larger churches in larger cities that can still pay a full-time pastor. Problem is, though, those larger churches, the pastors that are there, are staying longer and longer because they see that, I like what I'm doing here. Why would I risk going somewhere else where I may not be able to get paid the same? And there's a lot of the churches that have openings across the country, they are smaller in size. They may not be able to pay a full-time pastor what the full guidelines are that are being put up by the synods. And that's just not just for the ELCA, that's for many of the mainline Protestant denominations. So we have to get creative. Well, how do we do that? Well, one way is for churches to work together. Maybe one church says, okay, well, I can only afford to pay maybe 40%. This was other churches say, well, I can pay 60%. They work together and they can create a full-time call out of what they can do. And a lot of churches do that. However, there is this mindset in the US, and I really truly do not like it, and it's been permeating even into the church. It's the whole, American exceptionalism, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, we can make it, we can do it ourselves. And unfortunately, a lot of congregations even have that mindset where, we can figure it out on our own. We don't need to work with somebody else. And so we have these small churches that try to go their own way, but they can't. They just can't do it. And rather than trying to partner with someone else, they try to stick it out and do it themselves. And the situation gets worse and worse. The only way we can actually get through this is by working together. And whether that means, churches of the same denomination coming together or crossing denominational lines. Here in the ELCA, we have full communion partnerships with a number of denominations: the Episcopal Church, the Presbyterian Church, the United Methodist Church, the United Church of Christ, the Reformed Church, the Moravian Church, and I might be missing one in there somewhere, where we can cross denomination lines. I could effectively be a pastor at one of those other churches if they were to call me, or we could work together. And we have to do that a lot of times in small town settings where we don't have another church of our denomination to partner with. You'll find out in the Plains states, in Montana, the Dakotas, a lot of cross-denominational workings where you find what's called a federated church, where it's two different denominations working together. And they can make it work because they realize, there's not enough people in this town to have a Methodist church, a Lutheran church, and a Presbyterian church all separate. But if we join forces into one Protestant church, we each keep our own, we have each identity present, but we all work together under one roof. Maybe we can make that work then. And crossing ecumenical lines like that is crossing denominational lines and working on a more ecumenical basis. That is really the future of the church, in my opinion. We have become so fractured over time that it's no longer sustainable. And we still see the fractures happening. The ELCA had a split almost 15 years ago. The United Methodist Church is in the midst of their own split. But how sustainable are those breakaways going to be? Can they actually last for the long term, or is it going to get to the point where maybe we have to join back together again? Who knows? It's not like it was 100 plus years ago, where in the United States we had a dozen different Lutheran denominations because each state had their own synod and it had their own body, and to finally they started coming together to pool their resources. We can be scrappy. One of the things I love about serving in a rural setting, in a small town setting, is that we can be scrappy with what we can do. I admire some of the smaller churches in the area that don't give up and they don't give in, because they see value in what they do. They see value in helping people. Another quote that I love out of that article, and I'm gonna post a link to that article in the description of this episode, just so you can go on and read it yourself. Beware, there is a paywall it's a Washington Post article, and there's a paywall for it, but you can figure out how to get to it. But another one of the quotes I loved, it comes from Nandra Perry of the Iona Collaborative in the Episcopal Church. We've got some scrappy little churches that are out there being salt and light in some very inspiring ways. I think bishops are in touch with that, and increasingly with the importance of elevating the ministry of all the baptized and strong, well-trained, locally formed leaders. It's an enormous opportunity. Scrappy little churches. I've always said, and I believe I said this in a previous episode, those scrappy little churches do some of the most authentic ministry I've seen, because they're taking what they have and not lamenting on what they don't lament on what they don't have. They take what they do have and they can do some really wonderful things with it. But the future of the church in the United States, especially small mainline churches, we need to work together. We need to take these scrappy little churches and figure, okay, you have this strength, you have this strength, you have this strength. How can we work together to still be the church in our community. I look around us to where I serve here in Ohio, and I see the various churches that are around us, and I think, I wonder what the future has in store for us collaboratively. Across the street from me is a Presbyterian church that has a shared history with us going way back to both of our churches' founding. We were both founded in the 1830s here in this town, and we shared the courthouse as our initial worship space. Well, one week the Lutherans would worship, the next week the Presbyterians would worship, and we did that, and we had that shared history. And a few years later, when we left the courthouse to build our very first building, the Presbyterians would then join us because they realized, we need our own building, but we need to be out of the courthouse. So they shared our worship space while they built their first church. And that collaboration has continued throughout the years. I mean, we still do a lot of collaborative work with them. Right now, we're doing a shared worship series on Wednesday nights for Advent. And their pastor, who's around my age, he and I have had many discussions about, I wonder if maybe the future of our congregations down the road is that we go back to sharing a building again at some point. Because it's going to become too hard to maintain our own buildings. What if we shared one in the future? That could happen. The physical plant of a church, the building, is often one of the things that drags a church down, especially churches that have older buildings. Maintenance becomes too expensive. Heating it becomes too expensive. Those older buildings become a weight around their ankle that holds them back. Maybe down the road, we'll have a joint Lutheran Presbyterian church, because we don't, with that history and with that relationship that we've fostered over the years, maybe it'll come back to going back to that thing again. Who knows? If it does, I look forward to it. I love working with that congregation. I've said that ecumenical relationships are the future of the small town church. Down the road, we have a Methodist church and a Moravian church. I mean, who knows what could happen here? I look forward to seeing what happens. I look forward to that future that comes out of this. We can't look at that article, however, and think, oh no, this is the end of the church. No, it's never going to be the end. It's never the end of the church. When one door closes, another door opens. It's only a new beginning. We can't be so focused on the negative that we forget about the positive that can come out of it. Yes, some churches will close. That's an inevitable part of life. But other churches, maybe they're not meant to close. Maybe they're just meant to be reborn. Maybe they're just meant to become something else. We need to keep up with the way things are changing in the country. We had a quantum leap because of COVID and how we operate many things around the country. Education changed. The church changed. You think back to before COVID, how many churches had an online presence where they were live streaming their worship services? Only the large ones. Only the ones that could afford some big production setup. Now, I'd say over half, probably more close to 3/4 of churches have some sort of online presence. Whether that's they were able to get together enough resources to do a decent production setup, or there are others that just have a basic camera, like we do here. We have a little streaming camera, and we do a live stream on YouTube. That's a huge leap ahead. And we're going to continue to have leaps ahead as we go forward, as we figure out, what else can we do to keep up with the changing world? Because we finally realized we need to keep up. Well, that's all I have for you today. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening to all these episodes. With this particular episode, pass this on to someone you know in the church. Pass this on to your pastor. Pass this on to your church leaders, your church council, or whatever term your church uses for council. I know every church has a different one. But pass this along to the people in leadership in your church. Have them listen to it. Have them realize we're not alone. We can do great things when we work together. The Sermon in the Valley is written and produced at the Patrick Stevens Broadcast Studio here in the heart of the Tuscarawas Valley in Ohio. God's peace be with each and every one of you. Have a blessed day.